Hello, Obooters from around the world. My name is Kais, and I am 11 years old, and I live in Montreal, Canada. Welcome to our Oboot Zoom session, where me and my co-host Jayden, who is also 11 years old and currently lives in Sydney, Australia, will be interviewing our guest changemaker, Claudia Hinterseer, who is based in Hong Kong. Claudia is a senior video producer at South China Morning Post. She uses visual journalism to communicate news and to tell stories about people's passions and social development as they happen. Claudia's work covers a wide range of topics and issues and as such contributes to most sustainable development goals. Jayden and I will ask questions to Claudia about her background, her journey, her work, her skills, and her impact. We hope that you enjoy this session, and I will now be handing you over to Jayden to ask the first question.
Hello, Claudia. It's a pleasure to meet you today. I have come to, ask you a couple of questions. So my first one is, how do you like your job as a producer at the South China Post?
Hi, Jayden. Yeah, it's really nice to meet you guys too. I really like my job as a producer. Basically, in some way, I'm doing what you guys are doing. So I come up with interesting stories and then I ask people questions. So if you're enjoying what you're doing, then you can kind of see how much I'm enjoying what I'm doing. So besides asking interview questions, I do a lot of like a film, and then I do research, and then I put it all together so that it looks good. And what I like about my job is that it's never the same. Not one day is the same. So I get to meet a lot of people. There's doors that open for me that maybe otherwise remain closed. So I can go inside people's houses, get to meet people, talk to them, sometimes with a translator because a lot of people here speak Chinese. And then I get to be very creative in a way that I can edit. I'm not sure if you guys also edit your own videos, but I really enjoy the editing process where you cut up the interviews and you put the pictures together. So the whole process, and then pushing it out and seeing it being published and waiting if there's response to it. So yeah, I'm really enjoying my job. I find it very varied and very creative, and yeah, I'm having a good time.
Okay, so my second question is, what inspired you to have this sort of job?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Many things, but the first thing I was inspired by was that when I first saw a really good documentary film that opened my eyes to something that happened in the world, I saw the power of visual communication, and I felt that that was something that I wanted to be part of, and that I felt that that it could be a very fulfilling work life if I would go down that lane and be able to produce these kind of things myself and be able to tell these stories myself. So I was mostly inspired by seeing a really good piece of visual journalism and then wanting to do it myself.
Thank you for that. My third question is, what did you enjoy doing as a child?
Huh. So many things. One of the things I grew up in the Netherlands, in Holland, and I was most of the time I was just playing outside. So I would spend time outdoors with my friends, and depending on the season, we would either like play in the snow, or we would be outside with a ball or running around. So I really enjoyed just being outdoors with friends, and yeah, I think that was like the biggest part of what I would do in my free time if I wasn't going to school. I also really enjoyed going to school.
Okay. So what is the process of telling a story?
So it all starts with finding a story, right? So that's the most important. You have to find the story, and that depends really on who your audience is. Like, who do you want to tell your story to? And in the case of a visual story, what's very important is that you find the story that's visually interesting. So it needs to, something needs to happen. There needs to be some type of surprise in the story. Um, and people need to be willing to share the story with you. So you can't just kind of knock on someone's door and say like, I'm going to tell you a story, because if they're not like interested in sharing their story, then that doesn't go very far. So a lot of research needs to be done in how interesting is this story. Has this story been done before? You know, like you want it to be quite original, and you have to understand the visual aspect of it. Is something happening? Is it moving? Like, it would be really difficult to do a visual story about let's say a bonsai tree, because it takes a lot of time for it to grow and there's not much happening. But it's really much easier to do a story about a surfer, let's say, because there's stuff happening, somebody goes places, and then you have to, of course, find like a deeper meaning to do a story. Like, it can partly be inspirational. It's interesting to tell a story of someone that inspires other people. It can be a social story. It can be about the environment. You know, there's so many stories that you could do that would open people's eyes for the sustainable development goals. You can do it about poverty. You can do stories about drought. So it really depends what you want to tell and who you want to tell it to.
That is some good knowledge and understanding on how to like the process of creating and telling a story. So what change do you hope to create by telling these sort of stories?
Say that again, sorry.
What change do you hope to create by telling these stories?
Yeah, it depends which story, but what I hope is that my stories show the reality of what's going on in this world. And it can be anything. Like, for instance, if we do environmental stories, I like people to understand what's, you know, in certain ways that the environment is being pressured by human action, and for just someone to see that and to understand, maybe they can take action. So my whole job is focused on showing what's going on in the world so that people can actually act. And it can be everything. It can be about, for instance, struggles within the LGBT community, people that don't feel accepted because of their choices, for instance, in their love life. Or it can be about nature, how it's been pressured and how it's under pressure and what needs to happen. It can be political. So it's really depending on the stories that we end up telling at a certain time. Like, of course, these days we've been showing a lot of stories about the coronavirus and how it impacts people working in hospitals, how it impacts families. And so the idea is that if we are able to tell these stories, that both politicians and individual people can react to it, because it all starts by knowing the problem before you can fix something, right?
Yes, that actually is true. So have any of these stories changed you?
That's also a great question. I think so, yes, in many ways, actually, because I mean, my eyes open all the time when I do these stories. Like, for instance, the other day I had this amazing story that I could do. I could do a VR story in the tropical rainforest in Sumatra in Indonesia. So I was there with a camera that films virtual reality, so that when the viewer kind of watches it with the virtual reality glasses, they have the impression that they are in the rainforest themselves. And so I had the chance to go inside the rainforest with some people that work there to preserve the orangutan, because it's one of the few places where the orangutan is still living. And so I was invited into the life of these rangers, and we were there for days looking around, finding this ape. And it was a fantastic experience. And of course, like all these experiences, they changed me so much, and for the better, because I have the feeling that I have had so much chance to see how other people live and how diverse the world is, and how even people that live under a lot of stress, how they can still be joyful and hopeful. So yes, so many stories. And also I stay friends with a lot of the people that I do stories about. I did a story in Hong Kong about poverty amongst children, like youth poverty. And there was a young girl, she was 9 at the time, that I filmed, and I spoke to her, and I talked about how if it was difficult to be poor in Hong Kong. And then I'm still in contact with her through Facebook. So when she does something, we talk, and yeah, I remain friends with a lot of the people I do stories with.
Okay, now for my last question. If you were not doing this job, what job would you have instead?
I've always thought that if I wasn't doing this, I would like to be an architect. I really love architecture, and it's also a very um, social job, because you're always thinking about people and how the place where they live or where they work, how that adds to, like to their life, and how you can make it pretty on one side and also useful. So yeah, I would definitely be an architect if I wasn't doing this. And you? What do you want to be? Do you have a plan?
I'm not too sure yet, actually.
Uh,
I
you
mean,
have a lot of
me,
time to think.
I don't really know what job I would want, but probably a journalist.
Oh, so you're on the right track.
Yeah. Okay, so I have a few questions, not too many. Uh, do you know Mandarin? That is one.
I studied some Mandarin. I studied it for 2 years. Um, my previous employer was a Chinese media, and so I traveled all the time to China. But in Hong Kong, people speak Cantonese, and it's a different language from Mandarin. So I stopped studying because it's very difficult. But I do speak Japanese.
Cool. All right. So, how did COVID-19 affect your work?
In every way possible. So first and foremost, we had to work from home. Everybody had to go home and work remotely. So we were talking a lot through through Zoom Hangouts and Google Hangouts, and we had to communicate through Slack and WhatsApp and those kind of things. And then we couldn't travel, because as a journalist, you'll see part of your work is very often that you travel abroad and you go to places to tell those stories. So all of a sudden, me and my entire team, we were stuck in Hong Kong. And Hong Kong is a city of 7 million, but it's quite small. So I think by now, a year on, or maybe 3/4 of a year on, we've told about every single story we can think of to tell about Hong Kong. So we're waiting for the borders to reopen so that we can travel and go abroad.
All right. So, what's your favorite video that you made, visual journal or whatever?
So I made a video in Bangladesh, in Dhaka, in the capital, about this woman who takes care of children that don't have parents. And so she lives in a very small house with 40 children that she raises as if they were her own children. And I really enjoyed hanging out with her. She was a very sweet woman. Hajira, her name is. And that video was seen by millions of people. It did really well. People were very interested in the story. And the story is called A Mom of 40, because she had 40 children. And that's a story that I really, really, really like.
All right. And last question. Uh, do you have any advice for people who want to to do visual journalism?
I think if this is something you would like to do, you're on the right track. Start doing it. And do you edit your own videos?
No.
So start doing that. It's not so difficult. And there's a lot of good software out there where you can start cutting your own videos. and go out with your phone, like, or a small camera, or like on most of the mobile phones now you have a quite good camera. So just start doing it, and don't be afraid of the tech, because all the technology is basically pretty straightforward if you just put yourself to it. So I think you're doing great. Like you start to experiment, and by the time that you're done with high school, you probably want to do some internships with publications. So try to find online publications that you like maybe you enjoy, let's see, a certain channel on YouTube, or you enjoy, let's say, BuzzFeed or Vice, or I don't know if there's any channels that you enjoy watching. And then what you should do is kind of just write them an email and say, hey, I'm Kais, and I'm an aspiring journalist, and I want to work with you for a few months to understand how it works. And I'm pretty sure you can find an interesting place to do an internship. But yeah, it's basically just doing, it's accessible for everyone. And the one thing that's important is that you kind of that it gives you energy. And if this is what you enjoy, then you should definitely pursue the career. It's really nice. It's very diverse. And if you ever have other questions, you can always contact me. I can give you a lot of advice.
All right. So thank you, Claudia and Jayden, for the great discussion and for everything that we learned today. Thank you, Obootus, for listening to this interview. Make sure to follow us on Instagram and Twitter, and to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can hear about upcoming sessions with other changemakers. Please also tell your friends about Oboot and share social media links with them. And last but not least, go to www.oboot.co to learn about opportunities to collect digital badges and help us draw down carbon.